Hey, hello everyone. I hope everyone's well. Second, let me just adjust my screen. Okay, there we go. It's a little dark, but I used to have a lamp here, but then we put it away for a pie, so we didn't put it back yet. Okay. So we are holding here in Likutei Moharan, and we're in the middle of Torah Heh. Oh, sorry, we're in the middle of Torah Heh, and I think that just before we actually continue, I think we should summarize the first part of Torah Heh for those people who weren't here by the last year. So Torah Heh starts off with the pusik B'chatzoitzos v'kol shoifar huri lifnei hamelech Hashem, and he hasn't yet told us what that pusik has to do with anything. As the derech usually is in the Likutei Moharan, he starts off by telling us a whole drish, and at the end he ties it into the pusik. He also ties it into the Agadatas of Rabbi Bar Chuna in the Gemur in Bava Basra, which at least the first part of Likutei Moharan is based on those Agadatas. But so far what he told us in the first half of Torah Heh is he told us that at first that every person has to know that the world was created for him, right? The whole world wasn't created except for my sake. And he says that means a tremendous achrayus. Because if the whole world is for your sake, then you have to take care of the world. You have to daven for them and to help the world, to help
people. Do you
people.
want to listen to Rabbi Kidybinski's Likutei Moharan shir?
What time is that?
Right now. Okay.
So that's what he told us. And then he said that there's a level on which a tzaddik is able to come to a level where he can realize if a situation that's difficult for the Klal Yisrael
For an hour, but
is before the Gezar Din, which before the Gezar Din means...
But I don't want to interrupt supper for you. I mean, when's the chicken going to be ready?
Reb Chaim, if you could just like maybe mute yourself, right? Because there's like background noise over there. It's like I can do it for you. You can unmute it whenever you want if you want to say something. Okay, there you go. Okay. So basically the idea is he says that sometimes there's a Gezar that happens at Klal Yisrael, but it's before the Gezar Din. And before the Gezar Din means that the Gezar can still be averted. Then there's a level that's called after the Gezar Din. After Gezar Din is seemingly too late to avert the Gezara. And he tells us that a tzaddik can get to the level where he can feel that out and he can know if it's before or after. He says this depends on the idea of simcha, which of course is a common theme in all of Rebbe Nachman's writings, his idea of simcha. And he also connects the idea of simcha dafka in a mitzvah, in the sense that the real simcha a person can have, of course, there's all different types of simcha, but the deepest and the most Penimius type of simcha is a simcha shel mitzvah. So he says the avodah is the person to be able to get to a level where he can have a simcha shel mitzvah that's so great that he gets to this higher spiritual level where he can sense out where the world is holding and what can be done to fix it. He says this comes from getting to the level where you do the mitzvahs not in order to get a reward, in the sense that it could be that, he says, it could be that some people do mitzvahs because they're expecting a reward in Olam Haba or other types of rewards. So those mitzvahs are also good, but it's not selfless. The person's really doing it for his own sake. And then there's a level of doing a mitzvah on the level where the mitzvah itself is such a simcha for you that you don't need any other schar. And he says, he's medaik, you don't even want any other schar. You don't want the schar because as if the schar would take away from the mitzvah itself. So you just want to be just besimcha in that mitzvah itself. So that's the level that we're talking about. Of course, it's a high level, but that is what Rebbe Nachman says is the goal. And he says that this is something we see by Moshe Rabbeinu, that Moshe Rabbeinu was on the level, the Chazal tells the Moshe Rabbeinu was on the level, Ispakalia HaMe'ira, on the level like a clear lens, and the other Nevi'im were on the level of Ispaklar She'ainamir, on the level of a non-clear lens. And he says that's what it is, that if someone can really be so attached to a mitzvah that he loves that mitzvah itself, that's like seeing clearly. And when he's not, then it's not. And so he said that the main avodah is that it's important to get to such a simcha in the mitzvah itself, because Hashem is misamayich in the mitzvahs. So when you're besimcha in the mitzvah itself, then you get to a level where you tap into Hashem's simcha. When you tap into Hashem's simcha, then you're on that level where you're connected to Hashem, and then you can get to that level of sensing out whether or not a gzaira chas v'sholom can be averted or can't be averted. So we did. So that's basically in Torah Heh subdivided into subsections. That was section Aleph and Beis. So now we're starting with Gimel, and this is really the most important part. So he says here like this. He says, "The ikar of simcha he belev." The ikar of simcha, the main simcha, is simcha in the heart. Like it says in the pusik, "L'sata simcha belibi." You put simcha in my heart. So of course we know there's many people that seem to be besimcha, or that act very happy and jokey and so on and so forth. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're actually besimcha on the inside. Some people do it to compensate. Some people do it because they're not besimcha enough. So they think they have to like make things really late, but they can be really jokey in order to actually feel some simcha. So the main simcha is a simcha that's Penimius, simcha that's in the heart. And then he says, "V'i efshar lelev l'smoyach," and the heart can't become besimcha el ad sheyaser akmimis shebelibo, until he removes the crookedness of his heart. She lo yashis lev, that his heart should have a straightness of heart. And the idea here is that lemaisa, a person that has a crooked heart, so in the sense a person that's, for example, dishonest, cheats, lies, does things to get his advantage, such a person can't really be besimcha, because the simcha is a part of the Eibishter. The simcha is a part of Hashem, and you can't connect to that. The neshama, or the neshama is a part of Hashem. You can't connect to that neshama unless your heart is pure. That guilt, that conscience that we all have. Right? I once heard, Baruch Hashem, I never read, but I heard that Hitler wrote in his Mein Kampf that the main resentment he has towards the Yidden, so the Yidden brought this guilt to the world. They brought this whole Torah and this whole guilt that now we have to feel bad when we're doing things that we shouldn't be doing, and it's all the Yidden's fault, because Christianity and Islam and all those religions that spread morality and ethics, that came originally from the Yidden. But the idea is we all have this conscience built in, and this conscience doesn't let us sit at peace if we're not doing things properly. And because of that, to get to true simcha means you get to the level where the conscience isn't nagging you, right? So that means you have to be on this level where your heart is pure and your heart is straight. And so he says, "Va'az," and then when you get to that level and your heart is straight, yizke l'simcha, then you can really be besimcha. Moshe Kusav, like it says in the Pusik, "V'leyisher live simcha," that the straight of heart, those ones will have simcha. Akmimes shebelev mafshitin al dai ra'amim, or ra'umim, that this crookedness of the heart can be fixed through, ra'umim literally means thunder. And he's going to explain. Chazal write, the thunder wasn't created, it was only created to straighten the crookedness of the heart. And on a simple level, what Chazal mean to say is that if a person's going around and he's a Balagav and he thinks he rules the world, he sometimes gets scared by thunder. Thunder comes out of nowhere and thunders, and he jumps. And that reminds him that he's not really in charge. And that reminds him that he has to humble himself. So that straightens out the crookedness of the heart. Ibn Nissam, I see that you joined us now. How are you?
Shalom Aleichem, Baruch Hashem, how you doing?
Aleichem Shalom, Baruch Hashem, good.
Thank God, thank God.
Yeah, so we're holding in the middle of Torah Heh on the subsection Gimel.
Yes.
So we just started it.
Okay.
So Push Pshat and Chazal is that thunder, actual physical thunder, can cause a person to rethink himself and sort of straighten out his heart. But Rebbe Nachman is going to say on a chassidus level, somewhat different idea. So he says, "Ve'ro'omim," this idea of thunder, he bechinas kol she'uda moitzi b'koach tefillah. It's not talking, of course, on a literal sense it is, but on a different level, it's not talking about thunder. It's talking about the thundering of one's voice when one davens. And this is, of course, something that Hasidim emphasize very much. Even though the Arizal says, and this is interesting, the Arizal says that really one shouldn't daven loudly. The Arizal says that even in Psikha de Zimra and in Birchas Krishma, of course, in Shmar Esrei, it's al pi halacha, you're not supposed to say it out loud, but even the rest of the davening, the Arizal says to daven quietly. And the reason that the way that it's explained by the Mefarshim is that because he wants the davening to be a meditative, sort of an experience. So if you're yelling out loud, that's not conducive to meditative experience. Meditation is more gentle. But the chassidus forum were very emphatic the other way, and they said that a person can get to a feeling of divine connection to Hashem through davening loud, davening with a call. And this is all the chassidus forum emphasize this. The Baba of Ruv talks about it like every tish almost. He mentions this. You have to daven loud, you have to daven with a call. But then and then you also have like certain chassidus, like in Karlin and Stalin, they scream out the whole davening. Like I know that a lot of times in Borough Park, if I'm ever in Borough Park, I'm going to Bobov, so I always pass by Karlin, by Stalin when we're walking by, and you hear them screaming. It's like you hear it out in the street. And the old Karlin Hasidim, they barely have a voice because they've been screaming all their lives by davening. It's like so this is an Indian. This is what he says, that through that energy and that power that a person davens with that thundery voice, that will straighten out his crooked heart. And he says, "Imizei nasei romim," and this causes thunder. He means even literal thunder, because he brings like this. He says, "Ki ein bezoyer," because look in the Zohar, "Ki isa bezoyer," because it says in the Zohar, and Push Pshat in the Zohar, it's not talking about human beings screams by davening. It's talking about obviously Kabbalistic ideas, but on a simple level, even about physical thunder. And he said, he says, "Kad kulun nufik," that when the sound of the thunder comes out, v'ara be'uvay mitra, and that sound of the thunder meets with the rain clouds. Ishtuma kula libriusa, then that sound is heard in the world. V'du in romim, and that's what thunder is. So that's what the Zohar says. And this makes sense really even on a physical level, even on a scientific level, because the idea is that thunder couldn't exist without the rain clouds. So that energy of that thunder can't be expressed until the rain clouds clash together, and then that thunder can be expressed from koyach, from potential, into poil, into actual physical thunder that we hear. But he's going to again also say a chassidus pshat, because he wants to say that this kad kula nafik, this idea of this voice coming out, it doesn't mean that the sound of the thunder, rather not only the sound of the thunder, but it even means our voices. Our voices, when we daven, go up to a place that's called the rain clouds, which is going to explain what that means in a symbolic level. And then that tefillah is able to be effective, and to ishtuma kula libriusa, that voice, that the sound of your tefillahs should be able to affect the brias, should be able to affect the world. So he says, "Vikar harumim hem megvirus," and the main idea of thunder is idea of gvira. And of course, we see this. The thunder is something that, like we said before, like Chazal say, that it causes pachad in people, right? So it's an idea of gvira, of strength. And of course, he's going to mean that this means our strength when we're davening loud with our whole voice. Like it says in Iyov, V'ra'am gviroisav mi is boinen, and the thundering of your strength, Hashem, who can understand it? Who can comprehend it? Right. So we see that thunder is associated with gvira, with strength. For this reason, the blessing on thunder is right. right? That his strength and his gvira and his power fill the world. So we see that the Chazal in the Bruch itself, the Anshe Knesset Gdola Rimsaken, that we should say the Bruch and mention that the thunder is Hashem's strength, his gvira. He says v'hagviris hem bechinas koyach v'gvira. So these gviras, this idea of strength and power. People, and you yell with your whole call by davening, you'll bother other people and other people won't be able to daven because they'll be distracted. So he says that there's actually even an idea that you daven regular volume, but you scream in your mind. So in other words, you can be saying, you don't have to be screaming Burich Hatu Hashem, you can be saying Burich Hatu Hashem, but in your mind you're screaming it. You're visualizing yourself as screaming it. And Nachman says that that's really enough to accomplish this. But again, he says that's if you're not able to daven loudly where you are. But if you are, then you for sure should. So he says, so that voice of our tefillas reaches a level that's called rain clouds. He says, that refers to the moichin, that refers to the moyach, to the machshava. He's going to explain why. He says, Shebisham yarden tippin, because the rain clouds drop down drops and drops of rain. So too the mind is actually connected to the neshama, and the part of the neshama that's in the brain itself is only a very limited part. And most of the neshama is above that, and the neshama literally just trickles down drops by drops into the body, and the majority of the neshama is actually outside of the body. This idea of tippin. Some of the Mefarshim also want to connect to the idea that Chazal say, and of course this is on a spiritual level, because we know that physically it doesn't work this way, but that the actual tippas of zera, the actual tippas of semen that allow a child to be born, that allow a zivik to happen, actually emanate from the brain. So there's this idea that the brain is compared to the rain clouds which drop water. And then he says, K'mashkos b'zoya, the Zoya talks about this also. And he says, Bar ma'im chayim v'noizem min levunen, it says there's a well of living water that pours from levunen. And so the Zoya says, what does it mean levunen? Min levoina de moicha, that means from the white of the brain. And the reason is simply pushut pshat, because the brain is really white in comparison to the other parts of the body. You know, they call it gray matter, right? Because it's a different color. It's not red like the rest of the body is. It's this whitish, grayish kind of a color. And because of that, the Zohar says that this levunen refers to the brain, which is white. And from that brain, we see that there's a ber mayim chaim. There's water that's pouring forth from there. That's the idea that we said that the brain or the mind is like rain clouds that pour down water. And of course, what this means to us is that the what's it called? The rain clouds represent the moichin, the moyach, and that really refers to our own moyach. Because what's the reason why you should be yelling by davening, right? Hashem doesn't need you to yell. There's a famous story with I think it was Takar of Aaron Karliner, which is very appropriate since we just said that they're very emphatic on yelling by davening. That he apparently, when he was young, he learned in a Litvish yeshiva, and well, he was Litvish because Karliner is from that part of the world, right? But I'm saying, he was actually learning in a Misnagdish yeshiva, and they didn't take favorably to chassidim too much. And by davening, he would daven very loudly. And the Rosh Hashiva came over to him and told him, "Why do you have to daven so loud? You think Hashem doesn't hear you when you daven quieter?" And he said, "I'm not yelling for Hashem, I'm yelling for me. Because Hashem, you're right, Hashem can hear my tefillahs even if I just think them. But I'm yelling them loud because I want myself to get excited, to get ma'orer through my davening." And that's exactly the idea here, that voice of the davening goes up into the mind, into the brain, which is the rain clouds. And it's ma'orer the brain, it's ma'orer the mind to get into a mindset of dvaikas to Hashem. So he says, when that voice reaches the rain clouds, which is the brain, the mind, then you get to this level where that voice can now impact the world and impact creation. And that's this idea of thunder. V'zeh, he says this is what it means in Tehillim. Kol ramcha b'galgal. Literally, it means that the sound of your thunder is in the galgal. Galgal means like a ball or like something that rolls. And the Mefarshim learned that it refers to the rolling storm clouds, or even to a tornado, which is like literally in a round sort of a shape. So that's the literal pshat. But he says, Haini begalgalta demoicha. Galgal, which means round, is a root of the word golgalta, which golgalta in Aramaic or golgoilis in Hebrew means the skull, because the skull is round. So this shows that this ram, this thundering of your davening, reaches the galgal, reaches the golgalta, reaches your brain, reaches your mind. And then, quoting again from using the illusion of the Zohar, kad ara, when it reaches the golgalta demoicha, when that thunder of your davening reaches your mind, Nase mehakol re'umim, then that voice becomes really thunderous and very powerful. And then it can affect creation. And that's what it means. Also in Tehillim, pi yedaber chochmas, the mouth that speaks wisdom. Haine hadiber hayoytze mipi, the words that come out of your mouth, pegaya b'chochma, that reaches wisdom, that reaches chochma, that reaches your mind. Haine begalgalta demoicha, that means the moyach. So pi yedaber chochmas, the mouth speaking, reaches the level of chachma, reaches the level of intelligence, which is in the brain. And through this, then we get to the level of the continuation of that pusik. It says pi yedaber chochmas, the hagos libi. So I don't have the rest of the quote, but the point is that it goes up into your moyach, and then it affects your lev, it affects your heart, which is the emotions. Right? So in other words, basically what's happening is you're yelling by davening, even if you're not into it, even if you don't really feel like davening, you yell by davening, and that goes up into the brain, and that wakes up your brain, and then the brain then sends the impulse to the emotions that you should feel emotions by davening. In other words, you're your own emotions, right? Like I know that there's some people who like act in plays and stuff, and they say that when they have to play a role and they're supposed to be really angry and they're supposed to be yelling, then they get so into it they actually start feeling angry, right? Because your voice could actually be more how you feel. The same thing goes on the opposite level too. That if a person is feeling angry or upset or depressed or anxious, or I guess more angry and upset, and he starts talking gently and softly, then that will also affect his mind, and soon he'll start to feel calmer. So that's the idea. So he says, that through this thundering of your voice, your heart starts getting excited about davening and starts feeling emotions of connectedness to Hashem. Like Chazal say, Kol ma'oyer hakavuna, the voice is ma'oyer the kavuna. So if a person is not having trouble with kavuna, all he has to do is send out a voice, and that voice will get the kavuna going. And that's what Chazal say. A person has within himself yiras shamayim, durav neshmum, his words are heard. So of course the simple pshat is that someone who's a yiras shamayim is respected and people listen to him. But of course, that's not always the case. There's plenty of people that aren't yiras shamayim that are very respected in the world, and people listen to them, right? So Rebbe Nachman takes a step further, and he says, someone that's on level of yiras shamayim, then his voice is able to really thunder like that. Ki ra'am besitut de Yitzchak, because ra'am, this idea of thunder, is from the side of Yitzchak. Why? Because Yitzchak is midas hagvira, right? So thunder is connected to Yitzchak, which is gvira. The thundering of your gvira. And through this, your words can be heard. Which means not that your words will be heard, that people will respect you and listen to you and listen to what you have to say. Maybe that also. The idea is that through being me'orer your mind, through the call of your tefillah, you'll get to this level where your tefillah has an actual power, and that thundering of your voice, it has the power of real thunder in a sense, and it can affect other people and affect the world. In other words, your tefillahs are more niskabel, and you can actually start changing the world with your tefillahs. So a person that davens like this all goes into the same idea of Lefim Tzara Agra. I think that Lefim Tzara Agra is extremely big yisoid in Chazal and in the Torah. It literally means that according to how much effort you put in is the result. And of course, not in the physical world doesn't always work that way, because some people put a lot of effort into things and they don't necessarily see always the results they want. And other people, they don't put that much effort in and they do get results, even though usually effort does bring results, but it's not necessarily always the case. But in spirituality and in Dvaikas to Hashem, it's for sure like that. If a person puts a lot of koyach into a tefillah, that tefillah has more koyach, has more power. If a person gets very excited about Lilav and Esrig and does it with his whole heart, and he's all excited, that for sure has more power than someone that just did it quickly just to get it out of the way, right? So the more you put in, the more you get out. That's the klal in Rachnius, and I think it's the same idea here. The idea is that when you put in so much koyach into that tefillah, then that tefillah is energized, and that tefillah is able to then affect the world. So you'll daven for someone to have a refiah, and they'll have a refiah. You'll daven for someone, to have children, they can have children. This is part of the yisoid of how tzaddikim were able to accomplish these things, because they were on such a level that their words were actually charged with so much spiritual energy that their tefillahs had this koyach to burst through. Right? So he says, through this your words can be heard. That you'll be able to affect the bria with your words. Because the idea of shmiya, of hearing, is dependent on this. Is dependent on this idea of, if you want your tefillah should be heard, you have to put a lot of energy into them. Like it says in the Pusik, Kavakik, Hashem shemati shemachu, Hashem, I heard your hearing, whatever that means. Yiraisi, and I was afraid. So you see this connection of hearing, this idea of fear of Yiras Shamayim. V'zei perish, and this is the explanation of the Pusik in Tehillim, Geborei koyach oisei devuroi lishmoya b'kol devuroi. That it's talking about the Maluchim, Pashtus, and the Maluchim over there, it says that they're Geborei koyach, they're very strong, and they do your word, they do His word, Hashem's word, lishmoya b'kol devuroi, to listen to Hashem's word. Right? So the idea over there is, Chazal have a whole drusha out of there, this whole Indian that's like Nasiv and Nishma, that the Yidden got that level of the Maluchim. Right? Migul lebunai razeh, who revealed to my children the secret, that only the angels know about this, that this should be Nasiv and Nishma, to do the will before hearing the word. And then the Yidden on Har Sinai got to that level. But in his context here, Rebbe Nachman's context, that he's saying that you see this idea of geborei koyach, that if you put in a lot of gevira and koyach into the tefillah, then that will make that word, oisai dvura, that will make that word that goes up, lishmoya b'kol dvura, that it should be heard and should have an effect, an imprint upon the world. It says, Isa bezoyer, it says in Zoyer, Zakuin lemishma kulin mila'ayla, that if a person is worthy to get to this level, then literally means that he can hear words from above. In the sense, in the Zoyer's, the simple pshat in the Zoyer, it's talking about that that a person can hear from Shemayim, a baskol, or different types of rachnizdike koiches. You can hear that from Shemayim, but on the level that we're talking about, he sends up his call, and that goes up to the Shemayim, to the clouds, which represent the moichin, and then that call comes back down and can affect the physical world. Which is, of course, the whole idea of Yosef, the Lesata, Yosef, the Ayla, which is already talks about, chassidus form expand upon. They have this awakening from below, which then causes an awakening from above. Or in the illusion of the Arizal, it's Maim Nikfin and Maim Dechirim, female waters and male waters. We send up that energy. We do that first step. Right? It says like someone who wants to be Letar Messiah, I say, someone wants to make himself holy, so he's helped from Shemayim. So the idea is that we're able to send up that energy, even if we're not into the davening yet. We send up that energy and that call up into Shemayim, and then we'll get results. We'll get something that will come back down. and will be able to affect the world. So he says, Haini, Adei Hagviris Nasiromim. So through this energy, you create this powerful thundering voice that has a real impact. While there's Halev Shemai, and then the heart is able to hear and able to connect. Behind the Lahagas Libi Tvinis, which is the pusik quoted before, that my heart will Lahagas literally means like to be oisekin, or to think about, or to contemplate. My heart will contemplate wisdom. But here in this context, he's saying that because that pusik is connected to mi yedaber pi yedaber chachmas, pi yedaber chachmas, lahagas libi tvinis. Right, so through that level of pi yedaber chachmas, through that level of your mouth sends up that energy that goes up to the chachma, goes up to the mind, then the heart will be able to feel. And he says, the question goes, like it also says in the pusik in Meluchim Aleph, Nasatul avdechu lev shemaya, you gave your servant a heart that hears. So again, it's the same idea that the heart has to be able to hear, and you have to open that up through doing your effort and trying to daven with your whole koyach. And then your words will be heard in the world, will have an impact on the world. That's this idea of to hear the sound of his voice. And he says this is also the idea of the sound of the shofar, because the shofar is also the same idea of a voice. The Zohar is medayik on the idea that the shofar is a kol push. It's a simple call. It's not words. It's even more powerful. It's just a cry, right? So sometimes that cry out, that emotion charged cry, can affect things in a tremendous way, right? So he says that's the idea of the shofar. But do shofar shel ayil, and there's also a allusion in the Zohar that the shofar is a shofar from an ayil, from a ram, which is ayil shel Yitzchak, which is that ram of Yitzchak. So that, in other words, again connecting the idea, this idea of gvira, it's an idea of strength and power, and that's how our tefillah should also be. Bechinas ram gviraisav, this idea of the thundering of gvira. And that's what it means also in Tilim, Ashay Huam Yoidai Triu. Right? So there's also it says in Pusik, blessed is the nation, or happy is the nation, Yoidai Triu, who hear, or who know the Triu, they know the sound of the shofar. So the Zohar says Yoidai Daika. So he uses the Zohar's expression here. The Zohar is medayik, that the Zohar a lot of places talks about how important it is to know what's going on and to understand the kavunas of what's happening. So the Zohar is medayik yoidai daika. It doesn't say that the people that hear the shofar are happy. It says the people that know the shofar sound are happy. The Zohar says that means you should know what's going on when Tkiyat shofar is happening. You should be aware of what's happening in spiritual worlds, and then the mitzvah will be complete. But here he takes it on a different angle. It says, Yoidet, they know the triya means that it's not enough. I mean, the start is that the voice goes up, the booming voice of your davening, or the voice of the shofar goes up. But then it has to be sheyifga kol b'moich, it has to reach your mind, which is the idea of yoidai, that they know the triya's idea that it's affecting the mind. And then when it reaches the mind, then it has that energy to come back down and affect the world. It says Bechinas Ave Mitra, this idea of the mind, this idea of again the rain clouds. And it become on this level of thunder. Someone hears Tkiyas shofar from a person who's a Yirei Shemayim and fears Hashem, right? Because there's something also that's talked about, the Baal Tefillah is Rosh Hashanah, and the Baal Tekai, the one who blows the shofar, should be a Yirei Shemayim, because that obviously allows it to go up and affect things in a more powerful way. But he says someone who hears shofar from someone who's a Yirei Shemayim, he doesn't have to worry about thunderings the entire year. So what he means, of course, not just thunder, because for most of us, thunder isn't such a big deal as long as we're inside, right? But he means all types of thunderings, all types of negativity and difficulty and turmoil and challenges. If a person hears the shofar from Yiras Shamayim, who's able to have that kol shofar to pierce upwards and reach the clouds, reach the mind, and reach that level of where it becomes thunder, then he doesn't have to be afraid of any other types of thunder. And the idea is, like, you have this idea that a person has to be chas v'shalom. I mean, they have like this meaning on what's it called, on Yom Kippur. They do it in the chassidus shuls, that someone from the Chevra Kedisha hands out cake to everyone. Oh, sorry, on Erev Yom Kippur, obviously, because Yom Kippur you don't eat, right? So Erev Yom Kippur, after Shacharis, someone from the Chevra Kedisha hands out cake to everybody in the shul, and the reason behind that is if you ever have to have anything with the Chevra Kedisha, you should be yotze with this. In the sense that you shouldn't have to actually chas v'shalom need the Chevra Kedisha for anything else. So the idea is that if it's b'shared for someone to have shaykhs with the Chevra Kedisha, that can be transformed, and it can be in a positive way or in a negative way, right? And the same thing with any kind of anxiety that's on a person. It can be averted into a different, or rather diverted into a different type of outlet that it shouldn't be so negative. So if it was decreed on someone that he has to have thunderings in his life, those could be thunderings of turmoil and stress and challenges, or it could be the thundering of the shofar. So if he hears the shofar from someone who knows what he's doing, and that person is able to inspire the people hearing the shofar, then he fulfilled his obligation of thunderings already. He got that thundering. So he doesn't need that thundering in any other sense, in any other way. And he connects it to what we daven in Rosh Hashanah davening. Moshe Kusev, the koiles of rukim alayim niglaisu. With thundering and lightning, you revealed yourself to them, Hashem. If it calls shofar alayim hoifatu, and then with your kol shofar, you revealed yourself to them. So Rebbe Nachman's medayik shebekol hashofar, through the voice of the shofar, hoifia alayim mikolis zebrukim. His medayik, the hoifia is illusion of revealing. Hashem reveals himself, but hoifia is also illusion of passing and of sweeping away. So through the kol shofar, you can sweep away any types of other types of thunderings that you had to have in your life. You can get those with the kol shofar instead. So he says now Daled. So this is something that Rebbe Nachman is very, very into, and he talks about this all the time in all his sefurim. That your mind has to be clean and pure of any external chokhmah, external wisdom. Externally means external to the chokhmah of Torah. And of course, in this, there's many, many, many different shittas in Mahalchim. Rebbe Nachman's Mahalch is not the only one, because we know that the Rambam was very, very learned in medicine and philosophy and all kinds of different things, and other tzaddikim. So we can't chas v'shalom say that there was anything wrong with the Rambam or any of these other tzaddikim, right? So because there's many Mahalchim. Some Mahalchim say that you can use those wisdoms, those external wisdoms, you can use those to help your avodas Hashem. I see with myself that when I was teaching in high school, I was teaching like science and all these different things, and I would just love to just read the textbook, because it was just such a historis for avodas Hashem. When you see how complex everything is, and you see how the cells are so complex, and everything has all this wisdom, and so amazing. It would bring me to a state of feeling very connected to Hashem. Right, but Rebbe Nachman takes a very strong stance on this, especially on philosophy. On philosophy, he talks in many, many places about how people shouldn't learn philosophy, and even though it might bring some good because it might shed light on some moral issues or some ethical issues, but it causes more damage than good. And push-up shot is because if you learn philosophy, so then you deal with the questions and you have answers to the questions. But sometimes the question sticks with you more than the answer. So, so if a philosopher is contemplating, can Hashem create a rock that's too hard for him to lift? So there might be an answer somewhere there. He might give you an answer which is somewhat satisfying, but the question will always linger in your mind. And because of that, philosophy could be dangerous and could take away from a minna. Rebbe Nachman so into Amina Pshita and having a very simple Amina and Hashem, and these things make you think too much. Many people have this problem that they think too much. I deal with a lot of counseling types of things where people come to me and the problem is that they overthink things, right? So Rebbe Nachman says you just have to go simply, and philosophy is sort of a contradiction to that. And so Rebbe Nachman writes in many places is very against philosophy, and then he writes even about inventions. He writes this in Sichas Haran. Rebbe Nachman says that that just because a certain scientist, he doesn't say scientist, but just because a certain, let's say, inventor invented a certain thing, that doesn't make him such a great, big, tremendous genius. It just means that was the time when that was meant to be revealed. So when we have like a new amazing scientific revolutionary discovery or a new medicine that's discovered or whatever it is, that's like so amazing, that scientist who invented it is really just is just a regular person like everybody else. He's just standing on the shoulders of everyone who came before him, right? Because I doubt that he was smarter than Plato and Aristotle. But the thing is just that they were living so far behind, they had so much less to work with. So when the scientist is standing there and he has all this research and all this history behind him and all these developments in science and medicine and so on and so forth, then with using that, he's able to come up with something that doesn't make him so special, because Hashem decreed that Chachma should come down at that time exactly. So the fact that we have all this technology that we have now, which is so amazing, and can help so much and hurt so much, but help so much, is because Hashem's will was that it should come down at this time. And the Zohar already predicts this, because Zohar already says that the Zohar gives a date. I don't know the exact date, but the Zohar says a date when the Chochmah will open up, both the Chochmah Elyoina and the Chochmah Tachtoina. And so, of course, that coincides roughly with the Baal Shem Tov and with chassidus, at the same time as the Industrial Revolution, where people started inventing all these new machines and all these new things, and it's gone just so rapidly from there. But it's basically it all comes down when it's meant to come down. So you shouldn't look up to these inventors and these scientists as if that there's something so amazing and they're such genius. I'm not discrediting them. I'm sure they're smart. I'm sure they're smarter than us, or maybe. But the point is that it's not because they're smart that it happened. It happened because it was meant to happen at that time. So Rebbe Nachman's very, very into this, that the mind should be pure of any external chachmas and any external wisdom other than the wisdom of Torah. Of course, as we know from the first Torah, from Torah Aleph, Rebbe Nachman says that Torah is also much broader than we think, because Torah could be anything. Because Rebbe Nachman says that if a person's what's it called? If a person is born in the Bria and he thinks about the godless Hashem in things in creation, then that's also learning Torah. So according to Rebbe Nachman, technically, potentially, anything could be made into Torah. You could learn science and learn it as if it's Torah, in the sense that you're not learning it in order to have this wisdom and to feel so smart. You're learning in order to see the Chachmas Hashem in that. So potentially, if you do it in that way, in that sense, according to Torah Aleph, maybe it could have some sort of a place. This is what he says here. So in order for this whole system to work, that your tefillah should be able to go up and affect your mind, and your mind should affect your heart, it has to be that your mind is pure of these external things. The external things are impeded and they're in the way of it. And then he also says, and also, of course, the other thing that's always talked about in chassidus for him is machshava zuras, thoughts that are inappropriate. Because it's the same thing, right? It's even worse. Because if a person has chachmas chitzonius, okay, so he filled his mind with all kinds of information that seems very, very non-religious, and that distracts him from his spirituality, and that affects his neshama. All the more so when a person thinks of things that are actually tumah and actually bad, then those things can really, really affect his mind and not allow this whole process to happen. When the mind is filled with garbage, then it's very, very hard for that mind to be able to connect to Hashem. And then he says, mechometz, and that's chometz. Because, of course, we know the chometz is the Yetzer Hara, right? And chometz is something that grows and expands. So, shelo yachmetz es chachmusa, there's chachma, which is chachma is like this pure matzah. He's going to say that soon. It shouldn't become chometz b'chachmas chitzonius ibetavas, with secular wisdom and with tavas and with evil pleasures, negative pleasures. So the idea is that chumatz is something that expands and expands and expands, right? It's something. It's a force of growth, and a person can put in a little bit of tumah into his mind, and that little bit of tumah can then keep expanding and expanding. I've dealt with so many people that have come through different problems that they've had, where the problem started with one website that they just saw by accident, right? And then that got their mind into a whole different state, a whole different zone, where then they started slowly but surely, looking for that stuff and looking for it more and more and more, right? Because that one little kernel of tumah is like chumetz; it can expand and grow and soon occupy the entire mind. So he says, "Kedai kishayoytzi hakol v'yivga b'moichoi." So his mind should be pure, in order that when that call of his tefillah goes up and enters his mind, is avdem and iram that should be able to create that thunder. The rain clouds have to be pure for that thunder to be created. If they're full of filth, then that blocks it. Avo kishigalgalta the moicha utim betim. If your mind is stopped up and blocked up with timah, then that cause that energy not to be able to flow through properly. Like it says in the Pusik, you can become tumah in them, which in the Rebbe Nachman's context is referring to more than just what the Torah is talking about there, about the tumah. I think that's where it's talking about the tumah chayas, different types of chayas, animals that are tumah. But in Rebbe Nachman's context, it means that you can become tumah through all these things, or all these different types of thoughts. Azai ein kol nishma, then his voice isn't able to be heard. That process of turning it into that powerful thunder doesn't work. And then he says, Gam yishma yerusai shememeni toitzuas hakol. So you also have to make sure that yira shemaim you have is in place, because like we mentioned, that yira shemaim is integral to this process, right? So Rebbe Nachman talks about this also in Sichas Aran, where he says that Ahavas Hashem is the ideal, but Yiras Hashem is the absolute foundation. Rashi's Chachma Yiras Hashem, the beginning of anything, of any avoida, is Yiras Hashem. Yiras Hashem, Yira is Malchus, which is the lowest of the spheres, which is called like a shar to the other 9 spheres. When you want to move into Kedusha, you have to go through that Yiras Hashem, that Yira. So the Yira has to always be there. You always have to have that fear of Hashem there, and that will allow the process to continue. He says, like it says, Viram Gviroisav, right? Because his Gviras are that thunder. And then that's really what it means to watch your ear, the Shavir Shemayim, but also you shouldn't have fear of other things. Now, this is a tremendous midraga, because a person's naturally designed to fear things, and this is, part of how we're made, and it's made with chachma. It's very good that a person should be afraid if there's a speeding car zooming towards him, because if without that fear, he would get killed, chas v'sholem. Right? So the idea is that we're built in to have that fear, and that fear is sort of important in the preservation of our bodies. But the fact that a person has fear of external things shows a lack of fear of Hashem. Because if a person truly, truly believes in Hashem and knows that everything Hashem is doing is good, of course you should be careful. Of course you shouldn't jump in front of a speeding car. And of course you should take all the precautions that we're told to take in all situations that we encounter in our lives. You have to do your shtadlis, but you have to ultimately be aware that Hashem is in control. Whatever's meant to happen is meant to happen. So if chas v'sholem, a person is meant to get sick, or a person is meant to die, or a person is chas v'sholem, or a person is meant to have difficulties, then you should be mekabelos be'ahava. Of course, it's so easy to say and so hard to do, right? But that's the goal, that the person should try to not have yira, not have fear of other things except of Hashem. And that fear of Hashem should be the totality of his fear. And again, it's a process, right? Like they say that a person can never totally change his nature. He can only shift it, right? So it's like that famous story, which I don't know what the makor is, because I always thought it was a medrash, and I heard it's not a medrash. this whole story that Moshe Rabbeinu, when Pari saw his face or something, or someone drew his face for Pari or something, and so then he said, "Oh, this person has all the signs of a murderer," because because there's this whole chachma parts of that by looking at a person's face you can see his traits, and Moshe Rabbeinu turned that into that strength and that energy that he used in guiding the Yidden and pleading with Hashem before the Yidden and saying things like, if you destroy the Yidden, then erase me from your book, which sounds like very chutzpahdik to say to Hashem. But so he used that energy, which could have been used for murder, he used that for that. Or like Chazal do say that if a person has murderous tendencies, he should become a shoichet or a moyel, and with that he has an outlet for that. Right? So there's always ways of having a healthy outlet, but a person can never change himself totally. So if a person is an anxious person, he's most likely never gonna go skydiving. And he doesn't have to, right? Because a person doesn't have to transform his nature entirely, he just has to shift it. So so if a person is anxious, a person has fear, that fear should be shifted towards fear of Hashem. And of course, it's a long process. It doesn't happen overnight, and it has to do with a lot of affirmations and a lot of reading about betuchen and amina, and so on and so forth. But it's something that eventually can happen. The person can sort of channel that fear in a different direction. So he says, "V'zeh," and this is what it means when it says in Pirkei Avos, "Im ein chachma ein yira." If you don't have chachma, you don't have yira. Im ein yira ein chachma. If you don't have yira, you don't have chachma. Right? Which is a tremendous lesson in of itself. That in order to be a real Yirah Shamayim, you have to have chachma, because you have to have chachma to understand that you have to only fear Hashem and not fear other things. But then on the other hand, if you don't have yira, you can't have chachma, because all the chachma the person has, if he doesn't have Yirah Shamayim, then all that chachma isn't worth anything. But here he's connecting it to the idea of having this clear mind in order to be able to your tefillah should come out into bepoil and really affect the world. Is you have to have this chachma and this yira. You have to have a clear mind, and you have to have the fear of Hashem and not fear of other things. Here, and he said this is also what it means when it says Mezechtes Shabbos, Yired Gavril v'nuatz kuna beyam. This is a fascinating medrash. The medrash basically says, and of course, I mean this is in the Gemara, and it's of course not to be taken literally. It's obviously symbolic, and many different Sforim talk about this. The Rizal mentions Soidus and this also. But basically, the push pshat in the Gemara says, how was Rome founded? The country of Rome. It says that Gabriel came down and stuck a reed into the sea. Took a reed like a reed that grows by the water. He stuck it into the sea, and from that, the kingdom of Rome grew forth. So again, what does this mean? So Nachman tells us, Gabriel is Mishtalshlis HaGviris. That's the idea of Gvira. Gabriel, of course, is the Malach that's connected spheres Gvira. Because Gabriel, the name itself, right, is the Gvira of Hashem, the Gvira of Kail. So the Gvira represents Gvira. Haine Yira Chetzonius. And in this case, even though we're talking about Gabriel, so it's kind of scary to say this, but I guess in a symbolic sense you can say, this refers to a Gvira that's not good. It refers to fear of external things, fear of things that aren't Hashem. Nuatz kuna beyam chachma, that plants a reed, sticks a blockage into the yam, the sea, which the yam is chachma. The sea represents chachma, because chachma, it says it's as great as the sea, because chachma is infinite. So the idea is that these false fears literally stick like a splinter, like stick a wrench into your brain, right? And mess up your brain's ability to connect to Hashem properly. And of course, we can connect this to Rome, because Rome was all about Chachma. Well, the Greeks more, but the Romans also were into philosophy and into these types of Chachmas, which weren't Chachmas HaTorah. Right. So the idea is that this can actually affect the sea, it can affect your mind. And Kuna, this idea of this reed, he says, Du bechinas kol hayoytze mehakune. kuna means a reed, but also means the windpipe. And so in this case, we can say that refers to the voice that emerges from the windpipe. So if the voice that emerges from a windpipe is pure and is not afraid of external things, then you'll be able to affect things with that call. But if it's not, if it's affected by fear of external things, then it won't be effective. It says Haini, al da'ishtalshlis agviras, through this idea of these gviras, these negative gviras coming down, shebechinas saisfisa, the dahava, which says fisa means like dross or the garbage, and dahava means zahav, means gold. Right? So the idea is that when you mine gold, it's full of all sorts of impurities. You have to melt it up in the oven and take out those impurities, then you get pure gold. So dahava zohav is kneged gvira. The Zohar tells us this when the Zohar is talking about the Mishkan, Parshas Trimah, that Kesef is Chesed, and Zohav is Gvira, and the Choshes, which is what's it called? Which is brass or what's the other thing called? Or copper, is what's it called? It's Teferis. So the idea is that gold is Gvira, and Gvira that's good and fear that's good is very beautiful when it's fear of Hashem. When it's an external fear, then it's like the dross of the gold, like the garbagey part of the gold you have to take out. He says that's Yireh Chitzonius, that's his external fear. Nisha HaKol Nuitz Batimas HaSaychel, and then that kol that's affected by external fear is planted in the brain, and then and then the world can't benefit from your tefillas. It says ve'ikar lishmar moichoi shelo yachmet. So the main thing is, now we're only just right after Pesach now. So the main thing is to watch your mind that it shouldn't become chometz, like we talked about. V'zehi, and this sort of means in Tehillim, guar chayas kune, literally the beast of the reeds roared, literally, like a beast that lives among the reeds. I think some learn that means a hippopotamus, I think. I'm not sure. But anyway, the idea is that, so that's the pusik. Kedisa Bizarre, like the Zohar says, that the idea of chayis kuna, chayis is like the word ches, the letter ches of the alphabet, of the aleph bais, right? So the idea is that ches has a kuna, it has a leg, right? And so it says kuna ches tishbar, if you break the leg of that ches, the many high, then it becomes a high, right? Because a high is just a ches with a little part of that leg broken. So you make it from a ches into a high. The tasim is chometz matzah, and from chometz it becomes matzah. Again, the same idea, right? That we can transform and purify the mind from that chometz, and it becomes matzah. That your chachma shouldn't become chometz. Gar, that's this expression of roaring. We just said, it says that the beast of the reeds roared. So gar is lushan of meriva, it's an expression of fighting. Ki matzah lushan meriva, and matzah is expression of fighting also, which is interesting because you don't usually talk about it that way. But there's this idea, but there's this word mitzisa. It's, I think, an Aramaic word which means a fight, and that's the same as shorish as matzah. It says the tzaddikai, that the tzaddikim of the mitzisa, tzaddikim do battle, make war with sitra nachrinin, with the sitra achra, with the forces of evil. The law is krivi, the mashkan of the kedusha, that the forces of evil shouldn't be able to approach the kedusha. Haini. So that means, if you guard your wisdom, that it shouldn't enter into it any external wisdom, secular wisdom, and also that you shouldn't think about thoughts that are bad, inappropriate. That's like this reed of the Sitra Achra. Connected kuna, this is connected kuna chachma kuna bina. Also, Chazal tells us we should acquire chachma, we should acquire bina. The kedusha, we should acquire the proper type of chachma, the chachma and the bina of kedusha. And through this, to not sile the bechinas chometz, then we can be saved from chometz. The moisa, which is the Sitra Achra, which is Keneged Muvis. Kedisa, like it says, Machmeitzes, the word Machmeitzes, which means like, what's it called? The stuff you put in the challah to make it rise? Yeast, right? So yeast is Machmeitzes, which Machmeitzes is the words Chumetz and Mes, the Rizal tells us. Chumetz is because it's Chumetz, and then it has the word Mes in there also. Because the idea is that Chumetz that can affect your mind is from the Sitra Achra, which is the side of Misa, the side of death. Taman Sitra de Moisa, that's what the Zohar says, that's where in the Mechmeitzes you have there the idea of the power of death. But Taman, you should believe. And then this is also very interesting what he says here. All the fighting that occurs between tzaddikim. So now Rebbe Nachman knows a lot about this, right? Because he had a lot of his nagdas, a lot of rebbes and tzaddikim that were against him, right? So, yeah, it's okay, Rebbe Yisrael. If you have to go, it's fine. Okay. Kol tov, sei gesund. Right? So this whole idea of this, this whole idea that there's a war between the tzaddikim and the machloikas between tzaddikim, which we see a lot of times in our days, and we've seen in the past, even the Baal Shem Tov and the Vilna Gaon, right? Were both tremendously great tzaddikim, and chas v'shulam to talk negatively about the Vilna Gaon, about any tzaddikim. We don't understand what was happening there. It doesn't even make sense, right? It's like there's this letter from the Vilna Gaon that I saw once printed, where he is writing to Aruv in Berditchev, and telling him to throw out Rebbe Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, the Berditchever. Throw him out because he's with that cat, he's with those people, and it's like almost bizarre to see tzaddikim talking with what seems like such vengeance and such almost like hatefulness. But the Gru was tremendous. There's no way anyone could none of us, and could ever even come to the feet of the Gru, right? So what's going on? So the idea is, like the Rebbe Nachman says here, whenever you see there's a machloikas between tzaddikim, ein zeh, this is not what you think it is. Through this that they're doing, whatever this means, they're accomplishing things. They're somehow being mevatla sitra achra. Take her out, okay? Because I'm in the middle of giving a share. They're being mevatla sitra achra through this seemingly infighting between them. As they perish, and that's what the pusik means. Oizen shemas teichochos chayim, an ear that hears the reproof of life. B'kerev chachomim tulin will be among the chachomim. Lushan tlina meriva. So the idea is that a ear that hears the words of Miser will rest among the chachomim. He says this idea of tulin, of resting, is also a illusion of telina and meriva. It's also a illusion of fighting. So the idea is that between the chachomim, when there's this kerev, this krav, this milchoma between the chachomim, that itself there's something happening here that we don't understand. There's something happening that's on a higher level. If you ever hear of machlekes between tzaddikim, Taida, you should know this is only for you to take a lesson to yourself what not to do, right? That your moich isn't pure, but those tzaddikim themselves are for sure not doing anything wrong. There's something happening here that we don't understand. Regarding this, it says, those that come to her, which is talking about to the Sitra Achra, lo yeshiv, and they don't return. Lo yasigi orchas chaim, they never acquire the ways of life. In the sense that this is, I think, in Mishle, right? Yeah. So Mishle, it has all these parables about this wise woman, which is Malchus of Kedusha, and then you have this evil woman, which is the Malchus of the Sitra Achra, and that means all the taivas and all the nisyonis, because it's compared to like a woman. The Zohar actually goes into this in a lot of detail, because the Zohar expands on Mishle. It has this whole parable of this Zoina, of this prostitute who's standing on literally says standing on the street corner, and trying to allure people with her perfume, with her makeup, and with the way she's dressed, and she's just trying to catch you into the trap. And then once the person goes with her and commits the Avaira, then suddenly she transforms into the Malach HaMoves, into this scary, demonic being with a sword that's dripping with poison. That's the way the Zohar explains it, and kills him. In the sense that the Sitra Achra can drag us in, and then suddenly we find that we're dragged in, and we don't have a way out. So he says, "She'ata dovik b'sitra demoisa chas v'shulam." If a person his mind is impure, then he's attached to the side of death, to the Sitra Achra. B'chinas chometz, which is chometz. B'chinas Yirid Gavril, which is the idea of Gavril coming down and sticking this thing. The improper fear being stuck into the mind is a terribly dangerous force. But tied, then you should know. Should know it's good. This idea of planting this reed. Hani chochmas chitzonias. This is secular wisdom, right? That it's planted in your mind. It is affecting your mind. If your mind wouldn't be defiled by this chachma, you wouldn't even want to listen when people are talking about fights between tzaddikim. When you have that group in this message that's talking about a machloikas that happened, or a roof did something against another roof, or a certain chassidus group that attacked a different chassidus group, or whatever it is, if your mind is pure, you're not even interested in hearing this at all. And you know that whatever's happening is beyond us. Right? So he says, and that meriva, that machloikas that seems to be between the tzaddikim, is somehow for our own benefit. You know, you don't understand it. That we should go from muvas to chayim, mechumatz to matzah, from chumatz to matzah, meches lahai, from meches to a hai. The tushiv meyira ruah, and you should change and transform from a negative fear, just like we were saying, all those anxieties that come from a lack of min and Hashem. You should transform that, and mikol pugam, and from that voice that's not effective, right? Because our minds aren't pure. And from a chachma that's defiled, the yira toiva, to a proper fear, which is fear of Hashem. The kol toiv, to a beautiful, powerful voice of tefillah that impacts the world. The chachma toiva, and to the good chachma, which is the chachma, of course, of Torah. And if you protect your mind from this chometz, right, and that shouldn't be defiled, azai yivga kolcha begalgalcha, then that voice of the tefillah that you send out by davening goes up to your mind and impacts your mind. It creates this thunder in your mind. It creates this powerful energy. And then that straightens out the crookedness of the heart. And then you can be besimcha. So that's how to get to real simcha, to have a straight heart. But how do you have a straight heart? Well, you have to have a straight mind. Your mind has to be pure of things that defile it and that send in the wrong directions. And then you can be inspired through your tefillahs and then get to that straightened heart. Like we said, the life simcha, that those that have a straight heart, those ones can be besimcha. But they perish, and that's the perish of the pusik. Ancho b'saisa ram. I'll answer you in a concealed place with my thunder. And I tested you at the Mei Meriva, at the the Eden when we're in the midway. They had this test by the Mei Meriva, the bitter waters. Oh no, this was Mei Meriva, right? The Mei Meriva when they were fighting. But the idea is that Hashem tests us through fighting and through machloikas, that we should think that this thing aren't really tzaddikim, and we shouldn't actually think that. My meriva zeibechinas matzah. That's this idea of matzah, which is matzah is mitzusa. That's milchoma, bechinas moichin. And so if we're able to purify our minds and think things the right way and purify our moyach, alazay naserom, we can create that thunder that can make us besimcha. Okay, so we're basically over time already. I thought we'd finish this piece, but I think we'll have to save it the last part for next week. So thank you all very much for joining the shir. And I'm going to put the shir up online. And I know, Reb Chaim, I have to call you to discuss the plans about the website and so on. So we'll do that. The next shir is tonight at 9:30 is the shir in Zohar Kodesh. It's a very, very interesting and out of this world piece. So anyone who wants to join in for that can join in. The next shir is Tuesday, Sifsei Chaim Bez Hashem, also at 9:30. Okay, everyone should be healthy, gesund and stark, and besimcha, and Bez Hashem, mishtak v'zoicha to this real simcha that Rebbe Nachman is talking about. Kol tov, everyone.